1947, Vincent La Vista made an explosive discovery. In his report to the State Department, he identified the Vatican as the largest organization behind illegal post-war emigration. In addition, he also claimed that the operation would not have been possible without the International Red Cross. So naturally, the question is this true? And if so, why was the Vatican helping the Nazis? Well, La Vista gives at least one answer. The Vatican was willing to help anyone who was Catholic and anti-communist. The Vatican, says the report, further justified its participation by the desire to infiltrate Latin American countries with pro-Catholic and anti-communist people. Now, to understand the true role of the Catholic Church in those days, we'll follow three tracks. One is the Italian network, then the Argentina's government, and obviously the money. Italy at the time was a hub for many illegal escape routes, including Jewish refugees heading to Palestine through South Italy, and Ustasha war criminals from Croatia escaping through Italy to South America via a network known as the Ratlines. Well, the Nazis did the same. For them, Italy was the perfect corridor for many reasons. After the liberation of Italy, the fall of fascism, and the rise of a new republic, the country was so chaotic, flooded with many refugees, which made blending easy. The Red Cross operating in Italy was overwhelmed trying to process each request, and so were the local authorities, which were often happy to accept a little bribe. On top of that, the country was located just at the border with Austria, which made entry easy. Plus, word was spreading that the Catholic Church was helping anyone in need. Now, to be clear, Italy wasn't the only route to Argentina. Spain was also heavily involved, but we're just looking at Italy. There were actually a few specific paths to follow, which meant that it was all very coordinated and entry to the country wasn't left to chance. One of the most traveled routes from Germany crossed into Austria, heading for Innsbruck. There, fugitives were able to enter Italy through the Brenner Pass. From there, they would then head to South Tyrol, Rome, and finally Genoa. Normally, as said, these routes were extremely well organized, and every day a small group of people would attempt to cross the border. If they were caught and denied entry, they would just simply turn around and try again on a different day. Now, South Tyrol wasn't just a random stop on the way to Rome. It actually played a much bigger role. This region sat just at the border with Austria and had been disputed for many years, particularly because of its large German-speaking population. While Hitler wanted to annex it to the German Empire, to avoid any disputes with Mussolini, he didn't. However, the population in the area wasn't too happy about it. They were therefore given the option to choose between Italian citizenship or German citizenship, which meant they would be relocated. Around 85% chose the German citizenship, but for various reasons the relocation didn't happen. The citizenship question would be resolved only in 1948, when they all reacquired the Italian citizenship, but until then they were actually considered displaced people. What this actually meant was that any Nazi in South Tyrol could blend in with anyone else claiming Italian citizenship and acquiring a new identity. This quickly became a business where the locals would smuggle Nazis across the border offering help or accommodation, and the local council would actually issue an Italian identity card for them, confirming they were born in the area. The Italian identity card didn't hold much value abroad, but made things easier in Italy. Now, I'm not sure back then, but in Italy you have to carry an ID with you at all times, and police can randomly stop you on the street and ask you to identify yourself, in which case you have to show them an ID. And actually some Nazis in the end decided to settle in South Tyrol with their new identity, but the ones that decided to travel to Rome would follow what was known as the monastery route, which was basically a path that allowed them to stop at various monasteries along the way, which were part of the network. Rome was basically the heart of Vatican's operations. Here, the Germans were able to get their hands on the reference letter from the church, which would then lead to the Red Cross passports. But let's see how it actually all worked. Pope Pius set up the Papal Aid Commission in order to provide assistance to all kinds of refugees. The Commission issued letters of recommendation to the Red Cross, vouching for refugees' identities. The Red Cross, relying entirely on the Vatican's good name, would then hand out passports, often without ever even checking who these people really were. Two men sat at the heart of all this. One was Bishop Hudal, the other was Giovanni Battista Montini, the future Pope. Hudal was an Austrian bishop, head of the Austrian-German Catholic Church in Rome. He was known to be the one providing help to all Germans. He would arrange accommodation in monasteries around the city, money, visas, and places on ships, heading either to South America or Arab countries. Hudal played a really big role in running the Ratlines network in Rome, working alongside Draganovic, who was using the Croatian charge to help Ustasha fugitives, and Montini. Now, Montini wasn't just a bishop of some church in Rome. He was the Vatican Secretariat of State, working from inside the Vatican itself. He also supervised the Papal Aid Commission, meaning that those reference letters went out under his watch. But the Vatican has always denied being involved or even knowing about the network. Interestingly, it is also reported that Montini was a contact of the OSS and then later the CIA inside the Vatican. But back to La Vista, during his investigation he actually hired two Italian men to test how this network really worked, and this gives us an opportunity to actually understand what was happening. So this is all happening in Rome, where the two men met Father Gallov, pretending to be Hungarian. The first man recounted his story. He came from a labor camp in the Russian zone, no papers, lost his family in the bombing. The second man was there as a guarantee, confirming he had known the first man since birth and could vouch for him. Father Gallo replied that he could help, but only if the second man was willing to sign an affidavit swearing to those facts. So an affidavit was created with all the relevant information given by the first man, name, date of birth, and so on. Gallov also wrote a note for the International Red Cross office and sent them on their way. At the Red Cross office, the first man was asked for 3 photos. While they were out getting them, a passport application was already printed with all the information from the affidavit. Once back, the man signed it, they stamped his thumbprint, pasted the photo, and done. He was handed his new International Red Cross passport, just like that. A week later, the report says, the two men went back to Father Gallov with the same story, only this time it was the second man's turn to get his passport. And the exact same thing happened again. As La Vista also pointed out, this is not only a testimony of a broken system, but it raises questions, like who really were these men, who was taking advantage of this chaotic system, and also if getting a passport was that easy. Was there something bigger running underneath, like maybe a web of identity trafficking? But moving on, documents in hand, the next stop was Genoa, from where they would sail generally for Argentina. Tickets and places on ships had usually been pre-arranged either by Hudal or someone close to the network. Moreover, a similar network of priests was also present in Genoa. Many war criminals escaped using this exact network. I won't be naming them all, but we'll look at one, Adolf Eichmann, who was one of the major organizers of the Holocaust. Now, Eichmann, as we can see, got a visa for Argentina and a fake ID under the name of Ricardo Clemente through the network run by Hudal. With these documents in hand, he was of course able to get the Red Cross passport. Then he traveled around Europe, he stayed in monasteries until he departed from Genoa to Argentina. Now, interestingly, his Italian ID says that he was born in Bolzano, which is actually in South Tyrol. So you might be wondering at this point, how is Argentina feeling about all this? Well, President Perón actually supported the network. He basically recognized the expertise of many German figures and was trying actively to secure them after the war to boost Argentina's technological advance. His embassy in Italy worked closely with the Red Cross and the Church, and his government actually created branches to handle visas and even sea transfers, like for instance the Argentinian delegation for immigration, which was working closely with Hudal. Santiago Peralta, at the head of the Argentinian immigration office, was the one setting the rules. he decided who was beneficial for the country and in what quantity, and obviously Germans were preferred. Once the fugitives arrived in Argentina, the Society for the Reception of Europeans was their first stop, and this office practically acted as the last checkpoint to make sure that the right people were getting in. As for the sea transfers, Perón's government also had a man, and that man was Alberto Dodero. Dodero inherited his father's shipping business, turning it into an empire. His success did not go unnoticed by the Perons, and Dodero, on his part, fueled the relationship with the couple by giving them generous gifts and wearing gold replicas of their profiles on his chest. No surprise then when the government assigned most of their shipping contracts to his company. And that's where rumors has it that Dodero's ships played a role in the Ratline networks. In June 1947, Eva Perón, the First Lady, embarked on a glamorous diplomatic tour in Europe, and many saw this tour as an opportunity to consolidate the network. Among the many stops was Spain, which we mentioned earlier was part of the route to Argentina. She also met with the Pope in the Vatican, and her final stop was actually Switzerland. Now, neutral Switzerland was actually the center of the Nazi gold and money network. The Eisenstadt report found that between 1939 and 1945, Germany transferred around 400 million worth of gold to the Swiss bank in Bern, which today would be worth around 7 billion. During the war, Switzerland actually played a vital role for Germans, allowing the Reichsbank to deposit gold and convert it into hard currency, which was then used for international trade, overcoming that way the Allied restrictions. And then, of course, towards the end of the war, when many Nazis started to plan their escape, they would use Swiss bank to deposit all their money. But the city of Bern is particularly interesting in this case, as it seems it might have been the center of the whole operation. As we read in the testimony of Barowski, an Argentine immigration office was established just there. Barowski identified it as the headquarters of the Ratlines organized by the Perón government. The office space was leased from Credit Suisse, another bank heavily involved with the Nazis. Now, the funny thing about Credit Suisse is that they always try to downplay the role that they actually had. But in 2023, Credit Suisse was bought by a bigger bank, and that led to an investigation into their archives, which recently brought to light almost 900 Nazi-link accounts. But Nazi gold seemed to also have found its way into the Vatican Bank. Now, the Vatican operates in total secrecy and doesn't allow anyone to look at its archives. But one report, the Bigelow Dispatch, claims that the Vatican was safekeeping Nazi gold. And there's also a claim that 10 truckloads of gold moved from Switzerland to the Pontifical College. Now, just to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, the Reichsbank, the German central bank, was moving gold to Switzerland. Then some of this gold found its way to the Vatican. The gold in the Vatican likely served to finance the Ratline operation, covering costs, tips for priests, bribe money, and possibly some of the gold was traveling to Argentina with the fugitives. In Switzerland, on the other hand, the gold had two ways to reach Argentina. One was via the Argentinian immigration office, and the second was via the Werli Bank, which was a small Swiss bank which conveniently opened a branch in Buenos Aires. So the route was complete. Nazi gold moved from Berlin to Switzerland, and Nazi criminals moved to South Tyrol, Rome, Genoa, and finally Buenos Aires.